Hey guys, welcome back. Oh, look at that, battery's dead. That's great. Well, let's change the battery. Okay, now that we got some energy back in the camera, as you can see, we got quite a bit of work done on the 1940 Farmall M, Grandpa's tractor. But really, the engine was already out, so I just pulled the tin work off, the radiator, middle steering and tank support, rear steering support and gauge cluster. Interesting thing that I found with a few things, but we'll cover that later. Right now what we're trying to do is get the transmission top cover off, and this is one big heavy cast iron piece, so we're going to use the engine hoist to get it off. But I've already lifted it up and got the seal broke loose, so it should come right up. But I did get a look down inside here, and I think that this gear is new, so somebody had replaced the gear in here at one time, because it is a different color than all the other gears. It looks like it's been freshly machined, so I think that gear is new, and if I remember correctly, that's our 5th gear, so, or our road gear. So let's just lift it up and see what happens. Gotta put this back on the bench and put my gloves on, and basically I wanted to get this top off before I go any further, just to see, you know, what we're looking at as far as damage in the rear end, and hopefully there isn't any. Oop. That one is still, for whatever reason, locked in there. Now let's see what we're working with. Should be all clear now. Oh, that swing got real close to the camera. I don't know what these top covers weigh, but I would bet they're probably at least 300 pounds. You know, there's a couple people out there that make aluminum covers so you can swap them out. So if you're a big puller, whoa, you guys better hang on. You got clipped by the shifting forks there. We're doing it live, folks. Okay. Well, first impressions, I would say that it looks pretty good. Let's see. Let me take you off the tractor here. This gear looks a little rough, but I think that's our 4th, 5th slider. That one looks a little bit rough on the backside, but if you remember, this thing had basically no clutch. And see where we're at here. It had basically no clutch, and we had to basically grind the heck out of it just to get it in gear. But I don't see any major issues. No broken teeth, no terrible wear on the ring and pinion. I do know that my PTO will not engage, so I'm not sure why that is. Looks like there's a little bit of wear on the leading edge of the outside of this bowl gear. If you guys can see, there's just a little bit of chewing there. I'm not sure what that's about. Might have a bad bearing inside here, and if that's the case, it's a good thing we took it apart, because that can cause some major issues. When the bearings fail, the rollers can end up underneath the bowl gears and punch a hole through the bottom of the case, which is what happened to the last rear end that was in this. But for the most part, everything looks pretty good. I think that the bottom shaft there, some teeth with some wear, but not terrible. This one's probably the worst. I think that's the 4th, 5th slider, maybe. Let's wiggle some stuff around. I'm going to put some gloves on. We'll wiggle some stuff around and see if we can't see if there's a bad bearing or anything in there. Okay, well, everything looks pretty good. As far as the gearing, everything else, the bearings seem pretty tight. I don't see any major issues with really anything, and judging by this gasket, that is definitely not the factory gasket or the original gasket, so this has definitely been opened up at some point in the past. It does have what I would say is a new 5th gear / constant mesh gear. May have other new ones. The reverse idler spins nicely. There's 0 play in the bushing in that. The ring and pinion probably has a little bit of excess play in it, but I would probably put it back where it is. We'll see. We'll have to get the dial indicator out and measure what it's at. So, yeah. But as far as wear on other parts, some things that I noticed while taking it apart, the drawbar hoop has been welded in the middle, which tells me that it's been broken in half. It's significantly thinner in the middle as well, so this drawbar has been used to the point in the middle where it was wore so thin that it broke in half, which is a pretty common problem with these. You'll see a lot of them that have a second hoop that's cut like right here or even right here, and it's welded to the bottom to make that a little bit thicker and better able to withstand more weight. Another thing that I noticed is the drawbar loop. This has a strap steel type loop. Look at how much weld is on there. I mean, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this probably wore so thin to the point that it broke in half as well, along with the drawbar hoop. And look at how wore out this hole is for the hitch. I think these are either a 3/4 or 1 inch hole, and this one is definitely wore twice as long as it is wide. So that's pretty impressive. But this thing's seen a lot of work, pulling work. I know for a fact that it pulled a lot of trees out of the woods back in the day. So did my Case SC. The drawbar hole in that, the entire hole is built up with weld. So, but this thing looks pretty good for the most part. Like I said, there's some goofy repair that's been done here on the PTO engagement lever, and it's froze in place. So my guess is that this engagement tube is probably stuck on the shaft. So we'll have to get that working and then take a look at maybe getting a new shift arm for this. But so far, I'm hopeful that this transmission and everything is good, and maybe we don't even need bearings, but we'll see. I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch. But one other thing I did notice is this axle cap. There's supposed to be a grease zerk here and 4 bolts that hold this seal cap on, and all the bolts are missing and the grease zerk is broken off. So Hopefully we don't have to replace the axle bearing due to lack of grease on that, because they're not cheap. Last time I looked, they're like 150, 160 per bearing. So there's two here, there's two here, there's two here, there's two here, there's one in the front here, one in the bottom on the front, there's another one on the front of that, plus another one at the end of the input shaft. Same thing on the counter shaft, there's a bearing on the front. So I think last time I priced it out to do a full set of bearings on this, it's right around $1,000 to $1,500. So it's not cheap. So if you've got good bearings, count your blessings, because they are not a cheap endeavor. But we already got all the seals that we need for the rear end and the clutch housing. Haven't ordered gaskets yet, but essentially it's one here, one here, one on each of the axle housings, one on each of the axle caps, a couple gaskets on the front for the counter shaft and the input shaft, and the seal caps for those. And that's about it. There's shims behind the bull pinion carriers, so we don't have to worry about sealing that, but there are O-rings on them, and we'll probably have to get new O-rings. This brake was leaking terribly. This brake is pretty dry, but it was the cam mechanism was stuck, so this was an ineffective brake. But unfortunately as well, this tire is loaded with fluid, so I'm going to have to probably support this tire with the engine hoist, jack up this side of the tractor, unbolt the rim, pull it outside, and then dispose of the fluid in a environmentally safe manner. And then we can start, getting the rear end onto just jack stands, start getting the gears and everything out of there. But this section here, this will be easy. It's just a few bolts for the clutch housing. Frame rails are just a few bolts. I'll loosen the frame rails at the rear, take these 4 bolts out, same on the other side, and then I'll slide the pedestal and everything out of the frame rails, take the frame rails off, and then take the clutch housing off. So, because we have to replace the clutch housing. If you remember back a few videos, it's cracked here and the same on the other side. So we don't want to, although we don't want to risk a break in the middle of the belly. So, which has happened on these, especially if they're a loader tractor. Yeah, getting there. The M is a significantly bigger piece of machinery than the H, so everything's bigger, everything takes more muscle and more heavy-duty tools to remove. So the bell pulley itself, that thing is really heavy, so yeah, pretty hefty piece of iron. But one other thing I noticed, I got to get around the other side here. A lot of these H's and M's, the front drawbar mount, the pin comes up from the bottom, and then there's a small plate with a like a 5/16 or 3/8 bolt that holds that plate up, that overlaps that pin. But on this one, the pin comes in from the top side and drops down to the bottom. So I'm not sure if that's an early or late tractor thing. I think the casting information is here, but I haven't ran the casting code or the casting date numbers yet to see what year this rear end is. I know it's got a later PTO, so it's probably not a 1940 rear end. But it's interesting. I did get the serial number plate off, and these holes were threaded with small machine screws, and the machine screws turned right out. From the factory, one would think the other clutch housing has rivets, and one would think this would have had rivets. So this could be the second clutch housing that this tractor's had, and they transferred the tag over when they replaced probably the engine and the clutch housing together, possibly. But really something that basically not one single casting is original. These frame rails are most likely original because they have the early rubber mounted engine mounts, which have a closer bolt pattern here. The later tractors had a big cast iron block in here, and they were a farther, the bolt hole spacing was farther apart here on the frame rails. So these are likely the original frame rails. I believe some of the early, like the 39s, the serial number is stamped in the frame rail. Not positive on that, but I think I read that somewhere. But either way, I've got new frame rails that are going on this with the cast iron engine blocks, or the cast iron engine mount blocks, because you can't find good rubber mounted engine mounts anymore. It's just, they're too far gone and deteriorated. They don't make new ones, so you're kind of stuck updating what you got. But that's not a huge deal. It's pretty much where we're at. We got all the clutch and brake pedal components off. The hitch and drawbar assembly is all off. So at this point, it's kind of just main castings. You know, front pedestal, frame rails, clutch housing. Get the rear wheels off, and then start pulling gears and everything out of it. We'll drain it too before we go any further. But that's where we're at. So I know it's kind of an update video, not really much wrenching, but I really appreciate you guys showing up and watching and wrenching with me. And I'm gonna go inside and cook some dinner, but this is where we're at. So not much left of it. It's kind of a mess in here, but anyhow, I'm done rambling. You guys take care. Thanks for watching. Thanks for wrenching with me, and we'll see you in the next one.